Welcome everyone to the 2017 January edition of Escape America Now webinar. This is Dr. John Coben. Glad you've been able to join us today and looking forward to having some interesting conversation about events in Chile and maybe even in the United States or around the world for that matter as it affects Chile. And if you do have any questions, go ahead and just put them into the chat box on the left side and we'll manage those and get those answered for you. I've had a number of people either who were signing up or about to sign up and send in questions. I'll be trying to answer them too. I always promise to answer their questions when they send them in. So we'll have a section on that going forward as well. Wanted to start with the top story today in Chile, which is actually making news internationally, and that's the fire situation. And although I haven't followed it in great detail since I've been busy with so many things that just haven't been able to do so. It's been so far removed for me, especially rural areas down south, that I haven't followed it in great detail. But here I was looking at the paper today. I'll show you I don't know if you can see that paper out there. There's one of the fires on the front page of the national section, and here's the graph showing the different sections of Chile that have been burned. Translating it to acres, by my quick calculations, we've got about 1.2 million acres burned so far. Almost all of it, well, I'm not going to say that. I'd say a great majority of it, at any rate, is in the 6th and 7th regions. Or excuse me, the 7th and 8th regions, my mistake. That'd be Maule and the Biobío region, where Concepción is. And there's a big fire down near Cauquenes, which is a section right on the border between the 7th and the 8th regions, which was the epicenter for the 2010 8.8 earthquake also. And it burned right there about, well, I'd say pretty close to, between those two regions, 80% of all the stuff that's burned in Chile has been in those two regions right there. There are 3 pretty good-sized fires in Torres del Paine, which is a shame. It's just a beautiful national park. And there are 3 relatively small fires there, too. The 7th and 8th regions are the hub in Chile for forestry activity. So as you can imagine, this is absolutely devastating for the Chilean forestry industry when you have this many trees and stuff, and pine trees specifically, going up in smoke. And so they got the big super tankers, the 747s that are gutted out, and they're flying over trying to stop it. But it's just been a major disaster. It's really going to hurt the economy down there in the long run, especially because it takes so long to grow trees. But it is what it is. That's the current situation in Chile in forestry. I expect our lumber prices and things will be going up because of this. It makes sense that it would, at any rate. And probably even make it more profitable even to import some wood from elsewhere if the supplies get that low. So again, the fire section is in the 8th region, which the capital is Concepción, and also nestled up against it is Talcahuano. Inland from there's Chillán and Los Angeles. Those are the cities in the 8th region, the bigger ones. There's other smaller ones called Angol and Coronel, also Arauco, if you're looking at your map. Up in the 7th region, besides just south of Talca, you have San Vicente, on the coast you have Constitución. All those areas are, pretty close to the forestry areas, and they're burning like you can't believe. So anyway, that's big news here in Chile. The president has even canceled her vacations so she could monitor the situation. Nice of her to do that. Speaking of presidents, I do notice in the United States we keep following your trumped up situation there, and it's kind of interesting to me to watch. The guy, I predicted he would win many months ago, and when people told me I was crazy to believe that, when he speaks, you think he's kind of a dunce, but you realize what he's been able to do, and you realize that when you do realize that, you think, it's not just luck. He didn't just surround himself with smart guys and did this with all their help. He's been able to do what he's done, not just because he had an endowment from his parents, but because he's got some kind of business talent. And he showed that in the way he ran this campaign, and he went to the Electoral College, didn't worry about the popular vote. He tried to get these huge rallies and draw this great public following, and he succeeded. He did exactly what he needed to do to win, despite all his foibles and other problems. I remember people were telling me how how bad he is for this thing and that, and the way he treats women. And I said, what do you expect from a non-Christian guy who has no morals? Somebody said recently that Trump became a Christian. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, regardless of his religious beliefs, you have to say that the guy has lived a life in a way that is typical of men of this world. And he's not unusual in that sense. I don't look at this guy and say, wow, he's an extremely bad sinner. He's like Hitler or something like that, and Stalin or whatever, some guy who's really into some kind of very, very bad, sinful behavior. He's not any more, as far as I can tell, than any other typical man who's just doing what he wants to do. So seeing all that, I realized, well, especially among evangelicals, if he just shows a little humility, he'll just forgive and forget all that stuff. I mean, if they could do the same thing with Clinton for all he did, which is worse, then there certainly be the same for Trump. So I kind of figured along he would make it into office, especially beating Hillary, who was such a bad candidate and had so many other problems. Now people are saying, well, what happened? Now though, it's much better to have him than Hillary. That may be true. That's not to say that it's great to have either one. But what you can expect in the United States with all his protectionist policies, which he's putting up, which is a kind of an encroachment again into socialism in the United States, and really more into fascism, if you think about it. The America First idea was Hitler's and Mussolini's idea too in the 30s, and it worked real well for him. And that's what will happen in the U.S. You can expect that in the short term you're going to have tremendous gains in employment and work, higher wages being paid, lots of activities. You rebuild infrastructure and get plans laid and have legal opinions drawn up and the many other things that have to happen up there to make all his plans work. The guy's obviously a president that gets to work and puts into action what he says. He's not just blowing smoke. And he surrounded himself with all these traditional Republican guys and these deep thinking, even people like the Exxon Mobil guy. I think he's a pretty bright guy, to go and attack and do what he wants to do. And he's going to make a boon for the economy, especially as he rolls back climate change nonsense and moves forward with some of his agenda. Of course, as a libertarian, I'm not in favor of anti-immigration policies. I'm not in favor of protectionism. I am in favor of lower taxes and lower regulation, as he's going to try to do. But he's not a libertarian, and I'm not sure he was really a Republican. He's a populist. So I expect up there you'll have good times in the short run. That's going to hurt Chilean immigration in the sense that people are going to believe now that things are just wonderful and rosy. Remember, the smart ones left the fascist regimes in Europe in the 30s while the things were rosy, or at least on the decline from being the rosiest part. Hitler and Mussolini were heroes in the 30s for pulling the countries out of the Great Depression before others, especially Germany. And I think Trump is going to try to follow in the same kind of suit. He's got his demons or his people to demonize, namely Arabs and those who were trying to take away American jobs. So he's got his people to attack, and he's going to do it. He's also going to beef up the military, which is a great boon for employment. And if he starts a war, even better, he'll kill off a bunch of people, and that'll knock down by a few tenths of a point the employment rate by reducing the number of people who can actually work. So looking forward, I think in America you've got, as long as you survive, one of the people that actually survives, you're going to do pretty well. I heard California wants to secede, right? And you've got 33% or more of the people that want to do it. I hope they do. I want every state to be able to secede. I'm not very, very much in favor of secession. But of course, they're a bunch of leftists and want to secede and make California a true leftist paradise more than it already is. And more power to them. I hope they can do it. I hope they can leave and prove everybody wrong that socialism doesn't work and show how political correctness and socialism brings you to great society and all the other wonderful benefits they're thinking they can have. And then, of course, fall flat on their face and just be completely destroyed, as it will always inevitably happen when you follow those kinds of systems. At any rate, what's all this mean, the upshot for residency here? I think people are going to be beguiled. I think they're not going to see the writing on the wall and things, the way things are going. I think they're going to see a few good things they like, especially if he appoints a Supreme Court justice who's pro-life, for instance. It really cuts back taxes. people are going to start thinking, wow, we're really going to start moving along here. So that'll slow down, I would imagine, people coming to Chile. That's my guess. I may be wrong. There may be some libertarians like me who still realize that this is a ruse, that it's not something that's going to last. Nothing has really changed with the national debt. There's nothing to make us believe that America will stop being a warfare state, or that police brutality will stop, or that the alphabet soup of bureaucracies will not continue to grow and become more powerful, that family courts and child services rulings will become less egregiously evil as they already are, that the IRS will become somehow a better agency than it is. Those things are still going to be in force and come out after people in strength and really barrage the American civilization even more than it is. But if you're already up there and you're used to being blasted by the government in so many ways, you kind of get numb to it, don't you? You get used to it. It just sounds bad in other places compared to where you are. You figure the safest choice is just to stay put. So that's my view up there. Maybe somebody else has a different comment there, a different view they'd like to express. As far as Chile goes, we are also going to experience a tremendous boom period. And again, this is something I've written about for years. Any natural resource-based economy, not just Chile, it's going to be New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, South Africa, and many other places which are natural resource-based economies. That means that economy that exports so many natural resources to others to make up the great part of its gross domestic product. We don't manufacture that much here in Chile. We don't have that many services. Don't have a very big government. In fact, remember, our government's budget is the same size as Samsung, the Korean giant, that company. So Chile doesn't spend much, which is great. From a libertarian point of view, it's wonderful to have such a small government that you can say the entire country's government's budget's less than Samsung's. That's pretty sweet. But given that's our economic situation and the components of gross domestic product or government spending, investment plus consumption, plus net exports, we realize that here in Chile, small consumer base, 17 million people total, we get our earnings off of exporting. And what do we export? Copper. I mean, everything else is kind of left in the dust compared to copper here. We do export silver and some of the other components for making aluminum. We do export some iron, and we certainly have some gold. Those are all items that are mined. Lithium a little bit, and that's growing. After that, there's forest products, which are now tremendously damaged because of this fire, or the many fires, and a lot of fish and seafood products like salmon, king crab, regular, just run-of-the-mill fish, I guess you could call it, as well as dairy products, pork products, and wine. All of that is what Chile produces. Tourism, we have some skiing, things like that, hoteleries, beach activities. Those are relatively small, but still part of the Chilean economy. How is Trump's decision to do what he's going to do and building stuff, revamping things and putting the U.S. military on alert and building new ships and all the other things it's going to do? Well, there's a couple things. One is, from a military point of view, Chile's a friendly country for the U.S. The USS, was it Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, was here just a couple months ago in Valparaiso Port. We're watching it from outside my window here. It was parked here for at least a couple of weeks, it seemed. And there are a lot of times they'll join exercises with the great Chilean Navy. Chilean Navy consists exactly of 4 submarines and 4 destroyers. And they might have some tugboats and small PT boats, I don't know, whatever you call them. But they got 8 basic ships, if you can call them that, that are, I guess, pretty decent relative to their neighbors around here. So the U.S. military is just massively larger than the Chileans, but the Chileans get pretty excited when the U.S. comes down because there's joint exercises with them. And so we expect that will continue, and since this is a safe port for them to come to, and a friendly port, that will boost the Chilean economy and also give more interaction and perhaps more goods and services being traded on account of that. But I think that will pale by comparison, and that'll be a plus, compared to the amount of natural resources that will be purchased by from Chile by the United States now. That wall that Trump's going to build, for instance, and all those other things that were mentioned, are not just going to be solid concrete with rebar in it. It's going to be sensors. It's going to be a lot of copper wire, and other probably control booths and other potential gates and things like that. They're going to require other natural resources besides just concrete and steel or rebar, iron. Chile will be able to provide that. Chile produces 36% of all the world's copper already, and so we should be able to be in a very good position to increase that. And if we can increase it that much, we'll at least be able to get the higher price in the market as demand rises across the world for these products. China and India are already demanding a lot of copper. It's not like the U.S. is the only place that Chile sells to. Well, having said that, let me also, before I move on here, all the other things that Chile produces that are consumed in the United States will continue. The fruits and vegetables, dairy products, pork products, all produced in the winter, salmon, wine, and king crab that is sold in the United States and Europe will continue to be sold. People will continue to buy. Those are just a staple product. Lumber products will be used greatly, and although the U.S. and Canada have a lot of lumber, they still get stuff from Chile like other countries do from the wood products here. So all that stuff will continue, and that will produce a boom economy here in Chile. I expect for the next 3 years, while America's going up in its inflated bubble-like protectionist wave or rebuilding wave, Chile will do the same. The absolute insanity of Trump's idea is seen really in a couple of ways. One is that when you've got protectionism, all you're doing is protecting a small group of workers in factories and so forth by raising their wages, but everybody in the economy gets penalized, kind of like a tax just attached to everything. Instead of getting your goods that you were buying for $1,000, now you're going to pay $1,200 or $1,300 for the same thing. In general, that makes everybody poorer, worse off because of the protectionism. I think tariffs are one of the few things that nearly all economists, like 99%, agree don't make sense. Import tariffs hurt people in general. They surely help small groups of people in certain industries, but in general, by and large, they damage people in the long run. The other is Trump doesn't seem to realize that the Keynesian idea of putting people to work, just doing whatever, rebuilding something or digging a ditch and somebody coming afterward and filling it in, is actually productive for economic growth, and it's not. You do not produce anything new by one person digging a ditch and another person coming and filling it in. It may keep activity going along, but in the long run, you don't produce wealth by only replacing it or creating it and then destroying it and then replacing it like that. That's the same reason earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes are not a good deal for the economy. Sure, you can look at those big tornado fields you had in Georgia and Mississippi recently in the U.S. and think, wow, somebody's going to have to build all those houses again, and wow, somebody's going to have to provide raw materials that we need, or the boards and the nails and stuff that we have to go in. That's all true, but you don't increase wealth by replacing wealth that was destroyed. Otherwise, the way to become wealthy is just either pray for earthquakes and hurricanes or tornadoes, or just bring bulldozers in on a routine basis and just mow down towns, because then we can just put everybody to work building them again. The fallacy of this kind of thinking is that by doing that, because everybody's working, you're actually getting better off, when in reality what needs to happen is we need to preserve the current wealth and build new wealth. That's how an economy grows. So instead of wasting everybody's time and effort and resources, not wasting, but using everybody's time, effort, and resources to replace buildings that were destroyed by a tornado, we want to go build new ones somewhere else, if that's what the market would dictate. That's how wealth increases. The Trump program doesn't see that. When you put money into defense, when you put money into infrastructure, replace it, you're not creating wealth. When you put up a burglar alarm or when you build a new aircraft carrier, you don't become wealthier from either of those kinds of defense, a border wall included. Sure, you can protect what you currently have, assuming that those things actually work, from people destroying your current wealth. It's a cost. It's like buying an insurance policy. You're having to expend a certain amount of current wealth in order to preserve the wealth that you have. It's not growing the economy or making things wealthier. So he's talking about making America great again and all these kinds of things as if it wasn't great before. I don't know, but great in what sense. But it's not going to become wealthier. So in the short run, everybody thinks it's going well and looks good. But in the long run, America goes downhill because of these kinds of policies. Fascism is always that way. Keynesianism, these other kinds of policies don't work, economically speaking. But Chile will be a beneficiary of all that. We will sell products here in the open market because we export into natural resources to other countries. That means buy stock in Chile. That means buy stock in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, Indonesia, and other countries that routinely ship out natural resources that are going to be used in a great consumer society like the United States. I think the United States uses 25% of all the world's energy. It's the last statistic I heard was years ago. It's probably not changed much since then. And on the other side, they produce at least 1/3 of all the world's goods. So some people complain they shouldn't be using so much energy up there, but on the other hand, if they produce so much of the world's goods, it makes some sense. And that means that there's a market there to receive natural resources that is enormous. So where are you going to invest? Where are you going to buy stock? Where are you going to buy real estate? All those countries I just mentioned. That gives you a big underscore for Chile. Should we be looking to buy real estate? Right now, the real estate market is totally pathetic, just stymied because we have this outgoing, later this year we'll end the term of Michelle Bachelet and her consultation from the left. They're not going to be able to remain in power, but for right now, there has been a tremendous market slowdown in purchasing real estate. It's driven prices down a lot. There's still a lot of construction going on, which is because people are seeing past her. They know the construction period here is usually a year to 2 years, sometimes more, to completely finish a building or a group of houses. And so the smart money is investing for being around after the boom cycle hits here, which it'll probably take a good year for it to hit Chile. And that's good because we don't want to have any economic boom right before the election again in November here in Chile. But after that, the new president will have the serendipity of being in an economy that's going up because of external factors. So right now is probably a good time to buy property in Chile because the prices are going to be suppressed. Next year they should go up significantly, and so should stock prices. So whether it's real estate or stock company, I think it's a good thing to do. I think it's the time to buy. And why would you buy it in Chile? Well, Chile has strong property rights. It's a friendly country. It's loaded with first world places. It's a great place to live. We're not plagued by political correctness and other kinds of fads that ends up influencing public policy with nonsense things like climate change or spotted owls or other things that can be very damaging to property holders. So it's a good place to go relative to even New Zealand or Australia, South Africa, which have far more difficulties with those issues. Most people won't see it, and that's the way investing normally goes, isn't it? Where you very few people that profit, or very few people do profit because they don't have the foresight of getting in at the right time, and instead they wait until things are really moving up and going great, and then they end up buying towards the top. That's the typical cycle for investors, is it not? So Chile is a good place right now to be thinking of coming, even though very few people are, because they're thinking of how wonderful Trump is. They just don't understand what it's really up against with him. Some libertarians do, but my advice to you today is look seriously at getting yourself a place down here, someplace to buy, and maybe even when you're here, opening a local account where you can get stocks, or at least mutual funds that invest in Chilean companies. Having a place to live also gives you your Plan B strategy push that you need. You need to have a place to live, an address in Chile. Show you're serious about living here if you want to get your visa. They'll probably give you a visa anyway, but it makes it a little bit easier when you're established here with a piece of property and an address of your own. So even if you never end up living in Chile, the great thing to have with the Plan B residence is something that's bought in a secure place with a very, very good upside potential for making money. And then, being able to get your residency, your visa, and be able to come down anytime you need to and just move in. So those are all stellar reasons for people to look into Chilean real estate right now. And again, stocks will also be a good idea. The last several years, the Chilean mutual funds that have been in the private social security system, I'm talking about stocks, have gone up about 5%. Your average annual return has been about 5%. And so it's not great, but it's not terrible either, I guess. But I think that's going to stop now. We'll go back to much higher returns, given the current prognosis. What's going to happen 4 to 6 years from now? Well, that's a different story. That could be far worse. We have to sort of wait and see. It's really hard to project that far out. But for the short term here, good times are going to be rolling shortly in the United States and Canada, and I suspect also in Chile, especially after, say, about a year from now. Things should really start rolling along. So that's my take on some international ideas for the day. Also wanted to bring up this latest blog entry that I've written and talk a little bit more about the blogs and the way I do things, giving my attempt to be full of candor and very frank about Chile or any other country we talk about, some of the comments we've had from others. Let me just quickly cover this blog entry that I've written this month. It's an upbeat blog entry talking about young people, and you can read on escapeamericanow.info, the blog right now. Most of the people who come down here that I know, that I meet through the residency program or who come here just to consult with me about one thing or another, tend to be in the age group from about 45 to 65, and most of the people are in their 50s. And there are some that are a little older, and there are some that are a little younger. We do have a few people that are late 20s, early 30s that make it down. I came when I was 33 to Chile. But there's the exception, not the rule. That means that most people, when they come down here, don't have children at home. Or if they do, they're already adult children, and they may or may not have moved with them, even though they may be living with them at home in the United States. They may choose not to move to Chile with their parents. And so quite often, I don't need to deal with this issue, children. Sometimes I do. Sometimes there are some high school age kids, and we need to find where they can go to college, or where they can go to a high school, private high school in Santiago, for instance. Or they're maybe college age and looking to possibly study here. But these are very rare. It's a very rare thing. So I haven't dealt with the relationship side of what the young people are looking for much. So I asked my son. I said, he's 27. My son David, and he lives with us currently. He's working as a country manager somebody hired him out of the U.S. to come back down, so he actually stays with me at the moment. And at some point in the future, if he continues with that company, he'll end up going to Santiago, where most jobs are headquartered, rather than be here in Viña. Viña and Santiago are not that far apart. And I tried to explain this to my wife the other day. I said, when I grew up in Orange County, California, there were orange trees in a large part of it, and there were wide open areas and stuff, and now it's just solid buildings. If it weren't for Camp Pendleton military base, San Diego would connect all the way to Orange County, and Orange County would connect to Los Angeles and all the way up to Ventura County, and inland to Riverside and San Bernardino counties. I mean, the thing is well over 100 miles, more than that, right? If you actually went to San Diego, you'd be looking at almost 200 miles, I would think, of virtually solid city, and probably 100 miles inland. And that's the distance in Viña del Mar to Santiago. We're talking about to the edge of Santiago to downtown Viña, about 65 miles, 100 something kilometers. And if you counted all of Santiago, it might be a total of 100 miles. So I said, you could imagine that one day Viña, Valparaiso, and Santiago would be joined completely, just like it is in California. I think Dallas-Fort Worth, although it's much smaller, did something similar, right? I think there used to be a difference between those two cities, and I think it's gone now. So there is an advantage of being close and nearby at Santiago, and in Viña you do have that benefit. Well, why do people go to Santiago? Because the vast majority of people that come down here that we know go to Santiago. We're talking about 90-some%, I don't know. And there is, 3, 4, 5, 7, I don't know, percent that come to Viña. And all the other 1 or 2% go, who knows where. They were from Iquique to Valdivia, a little Fort, what's that place called? Fort Gulch or whatever it is down north of Valdivia. Some young guys starting some a building project there where they have kind of a high-tech industry in the rain country out in the middle of nowhere. I don't think that's going to go very well. I don't think that's very attractive to most people. We have some people who have farms down south towards Talca. We know some folks also who live down in Panguipulli in the Lakes region, some further down near Osorno, Puerto Octay. I know a surfer that lives down near Concepcion. So there are a few scattered here and there around the rest of the country, but they're odd ducks compared to the great majority that come here. Well, why do people go to Santiago? Well, most of them go there because they have jobs or some kind of business connection. There's also the reluctant wife problem, where getting a wife from a wealthy family to come down and move to Chile is going to be difficult. But if you can stick her in northeastern Santiago, where they have excellent malls and medical care and the shopping and the fun things to do, the artsy things to do, and things look pretty, and they are pretty, and in fact they look stellar compared to many big cities I've seen, it's a lot easier to transition. You can also find English-speaking groups, expat help. You can find a lot of places where you do business, whether it's a bank or a country club where people will speak English with you. It makes your transition a lot easier to go to. And so that is a wise choice that many men will take when dealing with a fussy or a reluctant wife. And I say that affectionately because I've seen it so many times. I mean, it's very rare the other way around where you have the reluctant husband. Rare, completely rare. The wife's dragging him down to Chile. It's usually the other way around. And to ease that transition, going to Santiago makes sense. Certainly, the center of Chile's economy is in Santiago. I mean, there's not any question about that. And there's so many things to do job and networking wise. So it makes a lot of sense to be over there. Why wouldn't you want to be in Santiago? What do people routinely hate about it? Air pollution. The smog is just horrendous. The heat in the summertime, especially last week when we were getting up to just touching 100 degrees Fahrenheit a number of days. Lately it's been in the 80s, high 80s maybe, touching 90, but it's still pretty hot. You also have the traffic issue, which is just appalling. It's just a terrible, congested city. And even the metro, which is a fine idea, and they're opening up new lines to help out, which works great, is very crowded most of the day. There are sometimes you can get on and do pretty well, but if you're in the center part of from downtown up to the upper class areas, it's like a sardine can. And there have been times that in order to get on, at least it was one extreme time I remember, I actually went on the metro the wrong way, 20 minutes to the end of the line, so I could be the first person on the train coming back and actually have room. It was faster for me to go 20 minutes out of my way and then another 20 minutes returning to the station I started with than to wait and try to squish in with thousands of other people trying to cram into the metro. So although the metro is efficient and works well, it can be a real pain at times to get on and to use. Not only that, you get robbed frequently on the metro. It's known for that aspect. So Santiago has that problem with traffic, congestion, and the air pollution. So you want to get away from that. Logical choice is to come to Viña. Viña, we have some traffic problems in the summertime along the coast, but they're avoidable. If you live here, you know how to get around that. And the tourists don't get up in the early morning, so you end up doing all your downtown stuff between 8 and 10 in the morning, 10:30 maybe. And all the rest of the day, you take the back roads above the beach. You don't even notice it. So you can manage with the fact when Santiago and Argentina and Brazil move in during January and February in Viña. Otherwise, traffic isn't a problem here. Air pollution doesn't exist here. Just beautiful. We have sea views. We have a beach. If you like the beach, or at least even like to walk on the beach or look at it, I prefer more than anything just to drive along it and enjoy it that way, just looking at it. Those do not exist in Santiago that are here, and we don't have hot weather. We had a couple of days ago it was at 83, and people were just really dragging, just so hot. And that is very unusual. A couple of weeks earlier, we had an 87 day. And 87 just is unheard of in Viña, so it was really unusual that we got up into the upper 80s. And normally here in Viña, we're in the 70s, or in the summer. And in the evening, we get down into the 50s. In the winter, in the 60s during the day, normally. And sometimes we get into the 40s. Even low 40s at night. I guess on some rare occasion we could drop into the 30s, but that's not going to happen too often. So your climate is one of the best in the world. In fact, some people say it is the best in the world. So those are the advantages of living over here. Now, if you need to use hospital services, you still have to go to Santiago. That's really where the best places are. So what you've got is a situation in Viña that you can live here a better life. You don't have to have a job where or network with business in Santiago. You live over here because you can get on a luxury bus or drive your car, either one. Luxury bus is usually the best way because you use your internet or sleep or whatever you want on the way, and get on the metro if you can squeeze in, because you're on the end of the line, so you usually get a seat right away, so you don't have to wait. And you can get to your spot in Santiago, do your business, go to the doctor, whatever you want to do, and come back. It's a day trip, and it's cheap. And we're talking about 5,000 pesos round trip usually. 5,000 pesos is roughly $8, right? So $8, you get a round trip from Viña to Santiago, and the buses leave every 10 minutes. So ideally, you can live over here and enjoy that. Getting back to young people now. A young person looks at all that data that says, well, Dad's probably interested in that. And if he's not worried about getting a job as his prime focus, just what he's going to do for fun, he's going to tell you there's so many more things to do in Santiago than anywhere else in the country. There are so many more malls, pubs, theaters, restaurants that are nice quality. You name it, it's over there. That everything else pales by comparison. There is always something to do in Santiago. And I think that's absolutely correct. There's no way that you can be better off as a young person with wanting some fun things to do in the evenings or with friends than be in Santiago. My son confirmed that. That's where all the action happens. Except he said, Dad, on December 31st, because the fireworks display is so big over here, and so many people come over here. Literally, in Valparaiso is crowded with 1 million people outside, and maybe more. I don't know. It's a lot watching the fireworks. That on that particular night, it's just as good there as it is in Santiago. The rest of the summer months, if he was going to give a 10 to those first two, northeastern Santiago plus the New Year's Eve festival here, he would drop maybe down to an 8 and say the rest of Viña during the summer, because it's got so many people here from Santiago and other places. Yeah, that would be about an 8. That's the second best in the country. The rest of the year it's probably a 7, because it's again still close to Santiago, but restaurants are far fewer. We've only got one theater. We've got everything that you have in Santiago, but just on a smaller scale. After that, you go pretty distant. Concepcion, I think, would be a 6. And if you read the rest of the rankings, it goes down from there. La Serena might be a 5. And maybe Iquique, because they have a lot of mining places to go after miners come in. But it's still nothing compared to Santiago or Viña. And the list goes all the way down. In fact, I include Pucón in the summer as a good place to go. That'd be pretty high on the list. Probably a 6 also, I think, if I have it on the scale, confirming with him and some other data points that I had. So when you compare all these things, if you're a young person, where would you want to be in Chile? The answer is clearly Santiago, northeastern Santiago, or Viña del Mar. And when I say Viña del Mar, I'm also including Reñaca and Concón Sur, just this general area along the coast here, the upscale, upper class area with the nice amenities, the things you can do to enjoy your life. You also have the beach here. There's another draw, right? Especially in the summertime, if you're a young person, you like to go to the beach. Like beach sports and things like that. So that was the article I wrote. Some people might be interested in thinking about that for young people. I know Joe just wrote a little comment in there. In his opinion, no comparison. He likes Viña far better. Well, we're both kind of biased in that way. I mean, I'm not a Santiago hater, and I suppose Joe's not a Santiago hater either. And I enjoy going over there every couple of weeks to get the stuff I need and do the errands I need to get done. And it's always great to get back. I mean, I don't want to have to put up with that over there every day. And I had to be careful. If I had a job there, you can't optimize your life to live in Santiago such that you avoid many problems. You can't avoid the air pollution very easily, but you can, find your job and then go get an apartment that's walking distance, for instance, to the job, or that you can get there in a taxi in 3 minutes and not have to have a car and drive. Those are great benefits if you can, to be over there, be able to cope better. It's not going to be a panacea that solves all the problems, but it will help some. But yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Santiago is a nice place to visit, nice place to get supplies and move on. Okay, so if you're a young person and you're thinking about that as a parent coming down or somebody wanting to expat, come to Viña and go to northeastern Santiago. Make your choice. Again, my son has a little different situation because he was raised here a good chunk of his life, went to graduate school here for his MBA, has lived here many years as an adult as well as a child, and therefore his Spanish is perfect. He's got friends here. He knows how to get around, and for him to live in Viña and just want to go on Friday and Saturday night to Santiago to go be with friends or do stuff over there is not a problem. I mean, it's literally just a few hour bus ride round trip, and he takes care of it. He goes and enjoys his life over there and has his life here at the same time. He has the best of both worlds. That will not be as easy for other people that are coming here that don't speak Spanish already, don't know the country so well already, or the way things are here. So take his advice with a grain of salt in that sense. The great majority of people that are young do prefer being in Santiago, although there is, again, a pretty good number of folks that are here in the Viña area too. I'm just trying to think if you're, outside of church groups, which I hang out with for meeting people, potential spouse. I don't know how people go about doing that, but here it seems like you'd have plenty of opportunity for the mulling around and on the beach kind of thing in the summer, if that's what you were looking for, more than like going to bars in Santiago. But again, I wouldn't know, so I'm not a good person to ask. But if you look at a young person, they're going to have a different perspective, and you might want to lay those details out for them. All right, let's go on to the next topic before I get to answering some of the emails for people. That is, for the first time in history, we've actually had a very slight increase in the number of newsletter subscribers in the last couple of months. What's the deal, John? Why are you writing negative things about Chile? Well, this month's article wasn't negative about young people. I think it was a very informative article and helpful for a very practical reason. But sure, I mean, when I see something negative in Chile, whether it's the real estate agents or the architects or the theft or the people taking advantage of the lying, I bring it up. And I think I've said this before, but I'm trying to underscore it again because people actually write comments in, wow, Chile was in my top 3 countries before you wrote this article, and now it's not even there. I might even not even be in the top 5 anymore. I think it was my top country, one guy said, and now it's not even in the top 3. I think that's what he said. And I wrote him a comment back, which he didn't reply to, which was, well, what in the world are you? What are your 3 countries that are better than Chile? I would like to know what they are, because I think it's a sort of a silly pipe dream to think that any place is going to be perfect. And we know the other top contenders, New Zealand, Panama, are right up there. So for some people, Costa Rica and Ecuador, I don't know why, but those also come into play. Sometimes you hear Uruguay mentioned. There are places in Europe, obviously, that are non-enclaves, because if you're wealthy enough to live in an enclave, Hong Kong, Singapore, you're in a totally different category than the great majority of people looking to immigrate. Even then, a lot of folks don't want to live in an enclave. So it doesn't matter how much money they have, they're not willing to stay in such a small space, especially when it's surrounded by either mainland China or Malaysia or European socialist empires. But be that as it may, there might be an opportunity for people to consider the Czech Republic or Estonia or Georgia in Europe as a place to go. Some people are interested in picking a place like Dubai, which has its own oppressive regime, far more than, in terms of social pressure, far more than Singapore. So where would you want to go? I mean, which country of the ones I just mentioned, or is there one that I haven't mentioned, that would you put on the list ahead of Chile, in spite of the fact that Chile has these problems? I mean, do you really think in those other countries just mentioned that there are no problems like Chile's that somebody could write a blog entry on? Sure, they don't write on it because they're trying to either have an axe to grind or they're trying to sell their country. That's why when Simon Black writes in Sovereign Man, you don't see him say anything negative about Chile. He's trying to only tell you the positive things. And somebody could say, well, that's because people are going to assume there's something wrong. When you actually mention there's something wrong, they must really be worse than what you're mentioning. That's not the way I work. I call it like it is. I give you straight up the negative things, and if there were other negative things, I would mention them too. I'm not holding back anything when I write about negative things in Chile. Other people do, and that's the main difference. If you go to Ecuador and you find in their constitution that it says, just like the libertarian lawyers told me that when I visited and spoke at one of their universities a few years ago, that the government is the owner of all private property, you have a serious problem. That's not a minor issue. You cannot live well in a country and expect to own property there and have your gold stored there and things like that, where the government is the owner of that property. You can say, well, in a modern feudal system, in the sense government always has a claim on your property and you just have the right to use and possess it, which is true. We do have a feudal system, but it's vastly different to live in a feudal system than to live in a communist system. And property rights are respected in the more feudal society because the feudal lords know that it's better to give people the ruse or the impression that they have complete ownership of their property, so they'll improve it. And they want to have the property improved. The lords don't want to, or the lords or the nobles don't want to do it themselves. So it's a good gain for them, and it's better for them overall to have even a certain amount of people in the middle class that are more professional servants for them. So if that's the way you're going to look at it, consider that communism is far different than feudalism. And yes, I wrote my dissertation partly on allodialism, so I understand the difference between allodial and feudal rights, and how there are very, very few people in the world who have allodial rights besides governments themselves or the states themselves. So if you look at a country like New Zealand, it's so socially leftist, so full of political correctness, makes the United States look just rank and file conservatives, or lock, stock, and barrel conservative compared to New Zealand. If you don't mind living with leftism, and literally looking up in the phone book under P and finding prostitutes listed, they don't, or whatever. I mean, that stuff can be oppressive in and of itself. And New Zealand is that way. No guns are allowed either, and that might be another issue. Chile, you can have gun ownership. It's not as extensive as I'd like to see it be, but it's still, you can have a gun in Chile. You look at Australia, you talk about socialism. Taxes are extremely high. People think, oh, well, I'm used to paying, 40, 50, 60% of my income in taxes. Well, okay. So does that mean you want to move to Australia and have it even go higher? I mean, is that really a good reason to go there, or something you can just overlook? In Chile, a person making $100,000 a year is going to pay less than 10% of all his income on 10% of his income on all taxes. Much lower. Living with lower taxes is a big deal. So nobody's mentioning that. Well, I'm going to go to the other country, even though it's got 40, 50% of tax rate on income and other kinds of things that I'm going to have to pay. So that's a huge issue. Costa Rica has enormous violence problems, not only kidnapping but also murder. So you are putting yourself at risk, and if you live in Central America anywhere, and Costa Rica is a good example of that. Panama is another. Panama and Costa Rica are both tiny countries. You need to work. What are you going to do? Panama City, the capital, the biggest city in Panama, has the same population as the Viña, Valparaiso metro area. It's not like it's a huge city by any stretch of the imagination. So if you need to start a business or to do something in Panama, is far more difficult, I would think, than here in Santiago or in some other place. Panama's weather is also oppressive. I mean, I don't know if maybe some of you like living in that kind of humidity, the tropical oppressive heat every day. It's so draining for me. I can't imagine living in that. But unless you're going to be in Boquete up the hill and run a golf cart business or a restaurant or something, you're going to have a hard time in Panama. There are great benefits of Panama. I'm not saying that Panama is a bad place to go. I'm only pointing out negatives that are not obvious to everybody. And when they hear that Chile has some negatives, they assume these other places don't have these negatives, and this is just folly. This is not the case whatsoever. Chile is not an aggressive country and also has no aggressive neighbors, despite all the saber rattling of Bolivia or maybe even Argentina at times. It's not the same as living next to mainland China or France or some crazy Arab countries where they might impose their religious laws on you and cross the border in Dubai or the Abu Dhabi or whatever and give you and oppress you in some ways. Could happen, right? those are always potential threats. And in Singapore, right, chewing gum in public's not okay. You can't criticize people. You get put in jail if you criticize openly a member of the press or a government official. Last I heard, I don't know if it's still the case, smoking pot is punishable by death, or even having marijuana. You want to live in a society that does that? Those are pretty serious problems. How about abortion? For many of us, abortion who are libertarians, the consistent libertarian position, the only consistent libertarian position for me, is to preserve all life. You cannot single out one form of life saying it's less developed or more developed, and therefore, if it's overdeveloped and aged, we can kill them because they're not as useful as society. And other people, that are young and unborn, they can't take care of themselves. They're just a burden for us. We can choose to get rid of them too. And then you make an arbitrary age cutoff, like 3 years old, like some people say. There's some professors that advocate for that. You can euthanize these people. And of course, if they're in the womb, you can just chop them up or burn them or whatever you have to do, puncture the back of the skull and suction out the brain at a partial birth situation. Those are non-libertarian positions. All people, all human beings, that's from the point of conception until death, need to have the same rights. So Chile has, although the left is trying hard to undo it, still abortion is illegal here. Not illegal in New Zealand or Australia, not in Canada and most parts of Europe that I know of. So how big of an issue is that for you? To say, oh yeah, well Chile's got people that, got bad architects or, lazy realtors, or they steal and the bureaucracy is horrible. Those are all true statements. But which one of those is worse than abortion? I mean, come on, folks. I'm trying to give you a little bit of a wake up here on how you're making judgment calls on where to choose to live. No one is telling you Chile is a perfect place. There may be other people that are telling you and trying to sell you something that Ecuador is great or Colombia. Colombia is actually, of all the ones I haven't mentioned, that may be the next star to look at. It actually is a good up and coming place. Kind of reminds me of what Chile was 30 years ago. Could be a good choice. In fact, I'd probably go there before I go to the other places because I can't stand the heat in Panama so much to live there. What kind of social activities do countries have? What kind of natural beauty do they have? What kind of opportunities are you going to have for your children, whether it's religiously, socially, in terms of meeting people? Those might also be fair questions. What language are you going to speak when you get there? Obviously, New Zealand and Australia are non sequiturs, but other countries you might end up learning languages that are not that useful in the world, where Spanish is a fairly useful language to know these days. Those are negatives, potentially negative things too, because you will end up having to speak where you are. So you go to Thailand, you're going to speak Thai to some extent. What good is that? Somebody mentions here the very aggressive vipers. Barbara, thank you for pointing that out. In Panama, yes, I remember driving along in Panama and seeing the brightest red snake I'd ever seen in my life just crossing the road. Apparently a pretty nasty thing in that part of the country. Chile has 9 varieties of snakes. They're very rare to find any of them. 2 of them could bite you and make you sick, but none of them are deadly. The only thing deadly Chile has in the whole country is the black widow spider and the brown recluse, which are bad, obviously. And the brown recluse are very common here in Viña, Santiago, so you have to constantly clean your home. But compared to places like Australia, nothing. Singapore, Panama, full of very, very deadly. Costa Rica and Colombia also, except not so much in the high areas like Bogota. Another issue. No hurricanes in Chile. That was a pretty positive article I put up. How many of you suffer from hurricanes or tornadoes where you live? And then you point the figure, well, Chile has earthquakes. Oh, yeah? Well, you're right. We do. But guess what? Chile has the strongest buildings in the world. I mean, we've had 8+ earthquakes, over 8 Richter scale, anywhere from 8.2 to 8.8 in the last 6 years. Very few people died. And most people that died, the 540 that died in 2010, well, at least maybe half of them went and were killed by the tidal wave because the stupid government told them to go back to their homes that all was clear. Even though the U.S. had sent out a warning that said they should not be going back, there's still waves coming in. But if you think of it, for having that kind of a quake, 8.8, and have only Obviously, only all lives count, but I mean, 250 or 300 people killed by falling debris and stuff in an earthquake of that size. That's a pretty impressive statistic. In Italy, you have a 5.8, which is literally, 30,000 times less powerful? Or more. I forget how to do the conversion there between one scale to the next. 10,000 for each, or it's 1,000 for each range, right? So maybe it's 10,000 times less powerful in Italy, and it knocks out 140 people or more. A very small quake by Chilean standards. We had a 4.8 and a 4.9 just the last couple of days, and routinely we have quakes in the 5s and 6s, and they don't cause damage. So would I rather be in the United States during a tornado outbreak in the south, or in Florida or South Carolina during a hurricane, or North Carolina, Louisiana during a hurricane, or Chile during an earthquake? Absolutely rather be in Chile during the earthquake. I see the damage on TV, towns completely obliterated and destroyed, just wiped out, houses gone from tornadoes or hurricanes. Those don't occur here. Don't have them in Chile. So how about the other country you're going to? Well, New Zealand's pretty good. They have earthquakes just like we do. And there are other places with building quality is horrible. A 6, which is level cities and kill many people. But they do also have some tropical cyclones that we don't have here. You can get a hurricane in New Zealand. So you're looking at natural disasters too, and the potentials for problems. I think you've got a far greater problem in those other countries. Chile has volcanoes too, remember, many of them, hundreds of them. But the smoke always, and the ash always blows to Argentina with almost no exception, and because of the prevailing winds. So we end up having fewer problems that way. Natural disasters are high around these other countries you mentioned too, and much more dangerous. How about non-natural disasters, namely those caused by warlike and warfare states around the world, like the United States, for instance? Isn't it a great place to live where you can go and have a government that goes and attacks and kills thousands of people around the world on average every year? Drone strikes, has its own constabulary force of police officers that are routinely into brutality, killing people who are innocent, just breaking into their homes and making the mistake and shooting the people. This occurs. Putting tabs on you with the NSA. I mean, is that what you want? Australia also is pretty high on those kinds of things, I understand, and New Zealand's probably not far behind. Those are pretty high on the list of places to go. Europe certainly is pretty high on a lot of those things. Why would I want to go to one of those places instead of come to Chile when they don't have those problems here? Folks, I'm trying to give you a perspective that I've underscored it before. Just because I mentioned negative things about Chile doesn't mean that you need to throw the country away. That's bad. Other places are not going to have problems that are at least as bad or worse. The truth of the matter is, all those other countries I've mentioned, everywhere else you're going to mention, even to Namibia or South Africa, anywhere else you might imagine going to, Isle of Man, Mauritius, all potential choices, they've all got problems. And the problems, I think, there are generally worse than the problems here. Okay, so then, Dr. Coben, why mention these problems? Well, obviously, if you're going to be making a big choice of coming to a new country, which is expensive, not only financially, it's expensive emotionally in terms of time and preparation and what you've got to deal with when you actually get here in a new place and you're doing things that are not done the same way as in your home country. You got to be prepared. And if you get blindsided by something you're not used to, because people aren't generally dishonest, for instance, in Canada, if you're coming from Canada or Germany, and they may even let you return something to the store without questioning your motives or think that you're thinking you're a thief or trying to pull a fast one on them. You may be able to take people at their word where you're used to, like an architect, and you're not going to expect him to extort you. That's going to happen here. You're going to be experience things that you're not used to, and it's going to make you mad because you're used to that thing not being a problem in your home country. It's funny, you're going to be a little bit hypocritical, like we all tend to be, and when you look at pro-life, it's a country which has much less abortion, at least certainly not legal abortion, or it's a country where there's much less violence. The murder rate in Chile is far lower. It's a country that doesn't use military to attack people, and cops are your friends. You're going to take that with a grain of salt almost and just assume, oh, that's great, it's a nice thing about being here. instead of getting exuberant, because if your reaction were similar to the disgust you find for lying or corrupt, bad architects or lazy realtors or incompetent maestros, your reaction is just so against that. But it's not so like, wow, I live in a country where they're not going to beat me up. The cops aren't going to come into my house and shoot me at night. Why don't you get exuberant about that? Because your reaction should be similar, shouldn't it? But it's not. People come here, they end up focusing on the negatives. And maybe that's true of anybody in the world. But I see that as an inconsistency in people's thinking. You need to know as a person what the benefits are of the country you're coming to. That is absolutely given. And I think I do that. 70, 80% of my blog entries over the last 7 years have been very positive about Chile. But you also need to know about the negative things so that you can watch out for them, be prepared for them, not get blindsided. Oh yeah, Dr. Coben told me that this was going to happen to me. They were going to cancel my insurance policy because you have too many claims and they're 1 or 2 a year and you're gone. You've got to go elsewhere. Oh yeah, he was going to tell me it was almost impossible to open a bank account in your first couple of years that you're there before you get permanent residency. I forgot that there are these 2 spiders that are dangerous here, and I got to be watching out for them. Dr. Coben mentioned that. You want to have this list of stuff so that you're not going to be frustrated by bureaucrats, by incompetent employees, and you can better prepare for it in your new country. That's why I write about those things. I'm not just venting I'm not just angry. I'm trying to help you be better prepared to get here. Other people that write about other countries don't do that. They have an axe to grind or they got something they're trying to sell. I'm not trying to sell anything, although I do have an apartment for sale still. I will mention that, yes. Other than that, I'm not here selling anything other than being an honest, objective consultant. And when you're going to hire me as your consultant, you're going to get exactly that. And I'm going to tell you why the medical care here is the cat's meow, and one of the best things about coming to Chile and why everybody should get it. And I'm going to help you understand that. And I'm also going to tell you where the slum areas are and why you need to avoid this or that, and how you can prepare yourself to have these negative influences not impact your life. That is what an honest, complete consultant does. Other people that are trying to sell a country and only selling the positive sides of things are not doing you a service. They are only leading you down a primrose path that's eventually going to lead to a lot of frustration for you. How many people do you think go to those countries and later on write to me even say, I was sold on Uruguay because this guy told me this, or I was sold on Ecuador because I heard this from this company, and all these people were fanatically in favor of Uruguay, and now I see the writing on the wall and the way things really are, and I want to come to Chile. That's not an uncommon thing to happen in my case. People do come around after they've been burned and see that things are not so rosy in other places as they were led to believe. All right. Barbara writes, don't you have timber rattlers? No, we do not. No rattlesnakes in Chile. Not anything like it. Joe says, we all consider the sins of our own home to be more respectable than the sins of others. It's hard to be truly objective. That is so right on, Joe. You're absolutely right. It's like, it's even in the U.S., people say that when you're outside Washington, D.C., it's so repulsive, repugnant, disgusting to see what happens in Washington with lobbyists and perks and all these, these people, basically parasites, living on the expenses of others. But they say also that after you move into the Beltway, the bacteria pool doesn't smell so bad after you've been sitting in it for a while. You get used to the sins around you, and it's not that big a deal anymore, or there's any other drawbacks or defects. And I can say the same thing about Chile. I mean, there are things that don't bother me like they used to, because I am now accustomed to this society. And you never really get accustomed when you're raised outside, but there's a lot of things I have a lot more take it easy sort of attitude about, whereas newcomers will not. And Joe hit the nail right on the head there. The U.S., Canada, Western Europe, Japan, you have serious problems. I mean, the problems I mentioned about Chile, about having a bad architect, that might affect you. It may not. You may never build a house. How often is the lazy realtor problem going to affect you? 2-3 times in the rest of your life? I don't know, unless you're going to be in the business. Those are not major things that are affecting your life. Radiation, drone strikes, people stealing kids because they're homeschooled, coming into your house and shooting you, or a cop, and many, many other things oppressive taxes, huge regulation, political correctness in your face all the time. That affects your life on a daily basis. So don't tell me that you're saying that this architect problem, the realtor problem, or some of these other things I've written about recently are so big that you'd rather have all that other stuff I've mentioned. No, it's because you've forgotten how bad it is where you live. It is a bad situation where you live. It's a good reason to leave all the time, especially now with a fascist Trump in there, and you can see the writing on the wall coming up in a few years. And stop playing games in your mind to say that it's really not so bad. Obamacare is really not so bad. Well, really? But I hear it's pretty bad. You're paying a lot of money. You can end up paying much better medical insurance here with excellent quality care, especially in Santiago hospitals, for a couple $100 a month. Maybe $100 a month, depending if you're young. Maybe if you're in your 60s already, maybe do $300 or $400 a month. It's still way less than Obamacare. And you're not going to have to go like some people I just spoke to recently to a hospital that's mediocre in the middle of Arizona and wait 6 hours just to be seen. You're going to go in and have an appointment and immediately be seen by a very well-trained professional and have very good results. As I say that, I've got my cast on my arm for my hand surgery that I just did a month ago. And very pleased with, in general, with the results here of surgeries. And this, with my medical insurance plan, even though it was only one night stay, the cost was $0. All they're trying to charge me $80 for a thermometer and some other things which I'm going to dispute. Other than that, the maximum cost I'm going to have for a surgery here is out of pocket is $80. Your Obamacare is not doing that for you. So, folks, take a, like my wife says, tomar armonil, take a harmony pill. And be in harmony with yourself and with others. Calm down. When you see something negative written about Chile, note it. Be ready for it. But don't get yourself all wound up and think that Chile must be a terrible place because Dr. Coben's not mentioning all the other things that are even worse or something like that. And that where you live is really not too bad because it's bad. That's why you're thinking about coming to Chile in the first place. And you can make your list of other countries, and maybe New Zealand and Panama and a few others will be on there. Great. Everybody should choose the place that they like to go the best. I'm all in favor of it. But there are many places that would beat the U.S. or Western Europe right now. I have a hard time finding or thinking of a place that's better than Chile overall right now. I'm still very, very sure about that. Again, I'm not talking about people who can live in Hong Kong, Singapore, Andorra, San Marino, Liechtenstein. You know, those multi-millionaires have more options than most people and are willing to put up with a lot more and can put up with a lot more because of their wealth. For those kinds of people, they have a different opportunity set. Not here. All right. Well, estoy en línea. Yo creo que está allá. Puede buscarlo en la cocina, si no consulta con la Pamela porque está abajo. Yo estoy en línea con los extranjeros ahora conversando. Sorry about that. My gardener maestro came in and he needed some information there. Anyway, so that's my pep talk. Let me go to the questions now, and I don't see any other questions in the sidebar, so I'm going to open up email. Joe, if I miss one, please let me know. All right, Megan writes in. Hello, my name is Megan, and I have some questions about getting Chilean citizenship. I was adopted from Chile in 1985. I was 2 years old. I have little information on my family. I was wondering if I can claim citizenship since I was born there, and now I live in the U.S. Thank you, Megan. And the answer to your question is yes, Megan, you can. If you're born in Chile and you have a birth certificate in Chile, you are a citizen already. There's nothing else you need to do other than go down to the consulate nearest you, find out which one of the Chilean consulates up there deals with your with your state, because there are a number of consulates and they handle several different states normally. Except there's in California where it's big, they have a consulate for half of Southern California and one for Northern California. But most consulates will handle a number of different states. So find out which consulate belongs to you and call them. If they won't answer the phone because they're busy, you might have to go over there and visit them. If you have a birth certificate, it's better. Otherwise, go there and see what you can do to get a birth certificate. And present your birth certificate and say, I want to have my passport, please, and they will process it for you. You also want to get your national ID card. Pretty simple. If you don't have a birth certificate and you have trouble getting it up there in some ways, Worst case scenario is you have to fly to Chile, go to the registro civil down here, and get the birth certificate that way, and then get your passport right here while you're in the country. We can help you with that, by the way. That would require a consulting day, but will be better unless you're fluent in Spanish and get around on your own. Probably better for you to do that, so we can just make the process streamlined for you and get your other passport. So yes, good situation for you in that case. It used to be you had to choose by age 21 whether you want to be an American, for instance, or a Chilean. Now you don't have to. They allow you to have dual citizenship. All right. And Megan, I believe, is a newcomer to Escape America Now, wanted to get that advice here. If you have a follow-up question, Megan, and you're online today, and you may be listening to the podcast, but if you're online, feel free to ask it in the sidebar. Got another question came in from Eric. He says, "Hey, John, I will understand if you don't want to answer my question, considering you are a consultant. I've not hired your services, but I will ask anyway." Well, I answer all those questions on the webinar, so even if he hasn't hired me as a consultant, he can certainly be a member of Escape America Now and once a month get his answer. His question is, do you think that obtaining and using Banco Estado Cuenta Root could eventually get me caught in a tax net? Well, just to explain what this is, that we have a lot of private banks here. Most banks are private in Chile, except there is one state bank called Banco Estado, Bank of the State. And they issue a Cuenta Root, which is an account that anybody can get who comes, even if they're only been here a short period of time. And there are significant restrictions on this account. FATCA applies to it, which is annoying for Americans. But you can do pretty well using this account to buy and sell stuff on a limited basis. I think your maximum deposit or monthly amount is, maybe the maximum account balance is 3 million pesos, about $5,000. But if you deposit it in there, you can get a card and go down and buy your groceries and stuff with it, pay bills. I do not like dealing with Banco Estado because I principally am against the state as a libertarian, and I don't like using them if I can help it. But having said that, those are my principles, not necessarily yours, Eric. And you may choose to go ahead and have a Cuenta Root. Will it get you in a tax net? I have no idea why you would think it would. Banking is secret here, private completely. The only people that have their bank account information divulged are major criminals that go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can then unlock bank accounts. It's the only court that can, as far as I understand. And the other is Americans, because as Americans, you live in the land of the free, and you have FATCA. And because you have FATCA, the United States government put pressure on Chile so that the Chilean privacy laws no longer apply to Americans. So those people, all of you, can lose your banking secrecy and banking privacy by the basis that you carry an American passport. So I think you might have an American passport, but if you know of a way that the American government could get you in a tax net by having a bank account in Chile, then maybe so. Otherwise, no one's going to even know you have it. Certainly Chilean tax authorities won't know or care. Should have no influence or impact on you whatsoever down here. Hope that answers your question. All right, I've got Bert with B-U-R-T, who sent me another message. She says, I'm looking at moving to South America. He says, I'm sending you a book I hope to finish one day. It's too dangerous to work with natural plants here in the U.S. Even though I've done it for over 15 years, I'm now 59 years young. If I came to Chile, would a natural healer like me be welcome? Please let me hear back with you from a timely manner. Thank you, Bert. And he says, I've worked under a horse website to better protect me from our government outlaws called by many names. Okay, well, Bert, first of all, these are, when you send emails, and once again, I choose to answer these on the webinar unless you are hiring me as a consultant. So your answer is here, not elsewhere. Appreciate you sending me books and so forth. Can't promise that I'll read them. But I, of course, am very interested in things like natural plant healing and things like that. So ever since I tried putting magnets on certain things like my wrist to remove pain and heal things, and impressively seeing it work, I have no idea why. I'm very interested in all sorts of alternative medicines. So it's and I know there are many other things besides magnets out there, and natural plants may be one of them. Are there unnatural plants, by the way? I'm not sure what the difference between a natural and an unnatural plant is, but you use the word natural plants, so I assume you know what you're talking about. But at any rate, you will not have any problem. Nobody will know about you. Nobody will care, and you will be able to practice your craft as you wish here. I can't imagine anybody cracking down on you. Regulation is far lower than it is in your home country. If you try to bring seeds here or live plants, you will have a problem. Whether they're in a container or on the plane with you, that will be an issue because Chile does not allow those things to come in. Chile has very few pests in its farming situation or sector compared to other countries in the world. So that would be the only thing you have to worry about. Hope you make it down. Hope you're listening to the show or at least on the podcast today and do well here in Chile with that market. Let's see if we got somebody else. Somebody wrote about the Chilean realtors named Scott, and he said, that's good to know. If I get serious, I'll definitely want to talk with you more about it. I have a software company. I'm thinking on your email might be fun and profitable to develop a multi-listing service. I would also probably want to establish a real estate agency, maybe with a JV with a local or an acquisition of a local, ? It's all just a pipe dream right now. I have several other projects in the works, but I'd love to have a reason to establish ties to Chile. Thanks. Yeah, well, you're not the first person to think about putting a multiple listing service in here. All of their efforts have failed. The way the Chilean realtors work is abysmal. But by all means, if you've got a way to do it, that's how entrepreneurs make money. Go for it. As far as the other things you mentioned, whether it's software or other things that you could do, great, have at it. The biggest problem I sense in your email is that you are still stuck in the United States and don't see that it's a priority for you to leave. And that, I think, will be the end of you, unfortunately, Scott. I think that people who don't realize they have danger are going to be caught off guard by the danger, just as people in the 1930s or 1940s were. It will happen the same to you. You're going on with your life thinking that things will be not changing in a drastic way that's going to affect you, whether it be from military or whether it be from direct oppression by government. You're not going to have a problem. As long as you have that mindset, you won't move. The cost will be too high for you to do so, and you will not change, and therefore I don't think you'll be fulfilling any of your dreams, unfortunately. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you are one of those who dabbles and has fun about thinking about going somewhere else someday, but it never amounts to anything more than a fantasy. And so you will have your just desserts where you are, because that is the choice you've made. I wish I had better news for you. I don't. I think that's all my main mail, Joe. If you've got something else, please let me know. A couple new scams. Kent wrote on this. I don't think we covered this last month. Anyway, he says, thanks, John. Your comments here better explain your client's position. However, he did survive the last 8 years, which were punctuated with the black on white hate crimes, economic sellouts of the internationalists, queer parties in the White House, and all the rest of it. Basically, one atrocity after another. I hope he's moving to Chile because he loves the place and not because he's afraid of Trump, who couldn't be possibly as scary as what we just had. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. I'm no Obama fan, but anyway, he's writing. I'm sorry, I did not get to the beginning of the message here. He says, John, thanks for the warnings about the Chileans. The scams run by Chileans. Reading about the guy who was scammed in the airport, I thought to myself, this guy is an idiot who apparently prefers Hillary over Trump, deserves to be scammed, and that he supported Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. Those two are into abortion as much as Hillary ever was, and that's saying a lot. The press lined up against Trump even worse in the way that Reagan was treated, and even the Republican Party wanted none of him. This shows us patriotic Americans who to vote for. Okay, so you're a Trump supporter, Kent. I get it now. And so my response here, dear Kent, thanks for your comments. Actually, the client is a Christian libertarian. From what I understand, he despises Hillary even more than Trump. He's a wealthy young businessman that I would hardly call an idiot. He cannot support Stein or Johnson on account of abortion either. Thus, the principled vote was to vote for none of the above. Trump's protectionism is evident. The wall idea is ridiculous, and his strong-arm posturing that all reflects a fascist, Keynesian, mercantilist combination is quite dangerous, and certainly not something any Christian libertarians support. I'm with the client. And that's when he came back and said later, thanks, John, your comments here better explain your client's position, etc. All right, I'm not sure if I mentioned that last time, but there, as an example, is somebody who's happy with Trump and actually thinks that things will improve in the United States over the long run, which I think will be his great undoing. All right, Joe, looks like you said I hit all that we had there. Well, I'll give it a couple seconds here, or a minute, as we tie up, because we've already gone over our hour. We started right on time today, and it's now an hour and 21 minutes later. A lot to talk about today, and a lot of good comments, I know, and a lot of things that I hope people find of interest in the responses. So if you have something else, please go ahead and hit it in the sidebar, and we'll answer them right now. Otherwise, I'll remind folks to, if you're interested in property in Viña del Mar, go to the escapeamericanow.info website and check out the Viña del Mar property we have. It's a beautiful property and just a very good price. I actually lowered the price because I want to be able to move on and build a new project. So the price has come down considerably. Have a look at that. Also, be sure, if you are an Escape America Now member and have not got a copy of my new book, that you do so. There's a 60% discount for anybody who's wants to get Life in Chile. That will be a big read, but it'll be a very helpful read for you coming into Chile to be prepared for what's ahead. And even if you're already here, to help you cope with what you're already seeing all around you, please check that out. Also see some big changes in OneCoin, and I know there's a lot of dispute about OneCoin, but I think these guys are quite bright and are going to take the whole cryptocurrency to a different level, a different means of acceptance in the world. Not that I think it's very technically interesting, like Bitcoin or some of the other new ones that come out, but I think they're using a marketing ploy or plan that's going to make a big dent. And anything that can tear down central banking, to me, is just a wonderful institution. I support it all. And so if you want to find out more about OneCoin, please check out the link that's on the escapeamericanow.info website. I think those are all very interesting opportunities for people coming to Chile, whether it's in real estate again or something like the OneCoin business, joining that network. Well, it looks like there's nothing else that's come on the sidebar. So with that, and besides losing my voice a little bit, I think I've come to a point here where we want to call it quits for today, and we'll look forward to seeing you all during the February 2017 webinar next month. And before that, if you have any other questions or comments, please do send them to us, and we'll be happy to queue them up for the next round. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great weekend, and hope to see you in Chile soon. This is Dr. Coben signing off now for the January 2017 Escape America Now webinar. Bye.